Some of us will be able to remember a time when certain ways that you presented yourself or went to a party were done in good faith and were a whole lot of fun. And a lot of us might have even been a part of church youth groups where on a church camp you would have had the boys dressing up as girls and the girls dressing up as boys, and those sorts of things these days. There's a little bit of a taboo, you might say, that is now attached to those. But there are plenty of movies in times gone by where it's been quite a lot of fun to think of people who were impersonating women. And I know that Bill Muehlenberg has been reflecting on one of his family's favourite movies called Some Like It Hot. Some of us will remember the movie starring Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis and Marilyn Monroe, and it was a really popular film. Some of those things have turned and changed in recent times, and Bill's been reflecting on the change. Bill, welcome back to 2020.
Always great to be here.
Bill, it did seem innocent, didn't it? Back in the mid-20th century, movies like Some Like It Hot, men dressing up as women, that was quite an entertaining thing, wasn't it?
Oh, well, it was all innocent fun, light-hearted fun. We knew it was a game, and it was fine in that sense. For those who know not much about the 1959 film, two guys, Lemmon and Curtis, in trouble with gangsters in the 1920 Chicago. So to get away from them, they dress up as women, join an all-female band, and the mayhem and laughter goes on from there. So the point I'm making to even write about it, which might seem odd, is, of course, times have changed. Things are different today. Today, sadly, it's no longer fun and games. We don't just do dress-ups anymore. Female impersonation, now we actually believe a guy can wake up one day and say, I'm actually not a guy. I'm a girl, and I'm going to start growing my hair, putting on dresses, but do a whole lot more than that, right? The whole medical procedures and so on. Worse yet for the children, right? 3, 4, 5-year-old kids have been so steeped in just the last few years of the whole trans revolution that they can come out and tell their parents, hey, I'm in the wrong body or the wrong sex. Do something now. And the whole push is this kind of affirmation therapy. That is, if they say it at 4 years old, well, they must be right. We have to go with it fully, do the social transitioning in the early years, and then the medical, physical bits a little bit later on. So Some Like It Hot has gone Some Like It Crazy. I mean, we've moved full tilt from what we knew was just silly fun to now taking it dead serious. And the guys who are in trouble, people like you and me, if we say, wait a minute now, can a man actually become a woman? Is this even physically, biologically possible? So, yeah, things have changed. So my late wife would be rolling in her grave now to know her fave movie is now, we've turned it on its head.
And those who might remember more recent times, coming back to the 1980s, which for some is still a long time ago, the androgyny of some of the musical performers that so many of us have as part of our memories, people like Boy George. There was a certain sense in which that seemed like a bit of fun at the time too. That was just a little creativity out on the edge and getting the attention of a musical marketplace. But that seems to have developed into something now much more serious, Bill.
Yeah, well, certainly that era, it was getting there, more, sexual ambiguity and maybe more overt stuff. Another obvious candidate, right, David Bowie. The androgynous look and feel and sound and everything. Although, interestingly, I've written about him. He later looked back on that whole period and almost kind of disowned it. He didn't like it. He didn't really want it. But as you say, that was 80s. Today, well, no, again, it's completely swung the other way. We take it dead seriously, and anybody who dares to oppose it is going to get into a lot of trouble. So things have changed big time. And sadly, again, it's the children one of my recent pieces, in addition to this, I look at a Queensland doctor. She was saying, look, 8 years ago even, I was not finding any kids, coming to me saying I'm in the wrong body or wrong sex. But today she's getting heaps. So again, adults pushing an agenda. Women being erased, obviously, in sport, but children being harmed because of all this.
In fact, just at dinner the other night with a friend who was sharing that there were some challenges within his own family around these things, and it's becoming so much more commonplace. And I've heard from school teachers that in the playground, children are behaving a whole lot more different to the way that you might have expected boys to behave and girls to behave in times gone by. So something really has arrested our culture, hasn't it?
Sure has. And again, when you have everything working against you, popular culture, music, TV, movies, everything pushing an agenda item, used to be, 30, 40 years ago, the whole homosexual thing. So even though the 10% myth was, dealt with, 1 or 2%, maybe the population, but simply when you get drowned in this tsunami of, everybody plus your uncle is gay, well, more people will experiment. Same here with the whole trans thing. If it's being pushed in your face everywhere from the earliest of ages, well, yeah, we're getting all kinds of confused young people who can't even really deal with this, right? Even as a 10-year-old, they're not in a position to really think through this and what's all this about. But goaded on by adults and activists, we're seeing a rise in the number of kids. It seems everywhere today, kids are saying, I think I'm in the wrong body. And as we say, the affirmation approach is what, hospitals, clinics, doctors, many are pushing. And those who dare to question this, like the Queensland expert, they will be given the boot. So feel sorry for our young people and the confusion they're now facing.
I've occasionally said this over the years, Bill, that there is a position that Christians have in holding to male and female being created in the image and likeness of God, which is actually on the side of people who struggle with their sexuality. And that is around these issues of doctors, because when doctors can't tell you the biological truth, then no one wins. It's not as though the LGBTQI plus people are winners because they are affirmed. They're actually the losers because no one, even with medical and biological authority, can tell them the truth. So someone has to speak up. And, of course, this one you're talking about in Queensland now has a threat to her own position and her professional career.
Yeah, well, that's right. And this gal, as I say in my article, I discuss her at length as well. She actually says probably that most of my colleagues, agree with me. Most of my, fellow doctors and psychiatrists and pediatricians agree, but they're all afraid to speak out. Right now, there's such a penalty and such a anathema if you dare to question the trans agenda. You can lose your job, you can be silenced, you can be fined in places, even thrown in jail. The same thing that happened 20, 30 years ago. We warned about the homosexual agenda. If we embrace that, there will be consequences. Same thing is now happening with the trans thing. So even though the majority may yet, as professionals, know this is wrong, we're not supposed to do harm, certainly not harm children. You spend time with them, with the parents, you talk through, you try to investigate. You don't just rush into an affirmation approach. We're turning medicine on its head. So even though the bulk may not be happy with it, few will speak because they know there's going to be consequences.
Arming yourself ahead of time, Bill, if you're a parent and you have young children and you recognise they are being influenced by the things they're hearing in the playground, the things they're seeing on the media they're viewing, the social media, these sorts of things, if you're a Christian parent, you're just as likely to be swept along in this current as anybody is. What are your thoughts here for how Christian parents might be a little bit prepared for some of the challenges they're going to face when it comes to their own children?
Yeah, well, it's tough. I mean, it's not just this. It's a whole range of, secular left inundation of all ideologies, all agendas being pushed on young people, school, media, education, arts, you name it. So it's not just the trans thing. So what do? I get asked this all the time, right? I say often, well, look, maybe homeschooling is why so many people are, looking at that option. If you send your kid to a public school, certainly, well, it's almost inevitable that you're going to have your kids exposed to this. So for some, might be homeschooling, but even there, they'll still get exposed to this. There's one meme making the round on the social media, a little daughter with her mother cooking in the kitchen, and the daughter says something about, "Mom, I think I'm a boy," and the mother looks and says, "Well, you're not, dear," and, just go on with, let's make these cookies. There is, as they get older, there can be confusion, mental, emotional issues that have to be dealt with, but you don't rush headlong into medical procedures, lopping off bits, trying to staple bits on. You deal with the mental, emotional questions that a child might have. So, yeah, Christian parents affirming with their kids early on, hey, what does Genesis say, right? God made us male and female, and that's always got to be the plan.
So affirmation for the Christian parent is going to start with the thing that isn't changing any time, and that is what's coming out of Genesis chapter 1. But there's a very significant and growing body of evidence around people detransitioning. Yeah. It's the, oops, I've made a mistake, and we're trying now, doing all we can to reverse the lifelong effects that happen when you go down that pathway of being trans. But the detransitioning evidence is growing, and I guess that's available, but somehow or other you've got to search for it because it's not being foisted on us in the same way the other propaganda is.
No, it's being hidden. It's being suppressed. They're the invisible people, right? Nobody wants to know they exist, just like they don't want to know there are ex-homosexuals. So, yeah, it's a whole new industry, a growth industry. You talk about those who are unhappy with a tattoo, so tattoo removal, or maybe botched or unwelcome cosmetic surgery. These are growth industries. It's the same here. People were talked in, especially as kids, talked into going down these paths, and now they realize they made a horrible mistake. But, of course, well, most of these physical changes are irreversible. You cannot undo what's been done. You'll probably be sterile the rest of your life, among so many other negative consequences. So, yeah, huge area, but those voices are not being heard. So certainly I try to give voice on my website. Kirley Smith with her binary website does the same, many others. So they're the new invisible people we have to be a voice for, right? Just as in the past, blacks were, seen as not being really there. The unborn seen as not there today. Those who are unhappy with their transition, they need a voice, and they need to be championed because the media, the mainstream, won't go with them.
Well, let me point listeners to a couple of articles that you've written this week, Bill. One of them really around coming back to what we started talking about at the beginning of our conversation, talking about the movies, Some Like It Hot, dating back to, I think you said, 1959. At a time when female impersonators was quite innocent and a whole lot of fun. But things have changed through the decades, and things are quite challenging now. Though those articles, one is called Say No to Today's Female Impersonators, and another article called Silencing Trans Dissent. You'll be able to find those at billmuehlenberg.com or simply Google Culture Watch, one word. Bill, good insights as always. Thanks so much for sharing those with us today on 2020.
Thanks again.